did to my daughter, Teresa Ann Marie Lynch, was evil, hateful, and despicable. You are now dead and rotting and repulsive to me.
Read the journal she wrote. She hated you.
Thank you, Judge.
She hated you.
Thank you.
You're a loser.
Mr. Ferguson, can I get you to stand up there and podium, please? All right, I need to have you raise your right hand for me. Okay, all right.
Just put me back in my cell.
Okay.
In a world where family should be a source of affection and safety, these shocking cases reveal the unimaginable cruelty some are capable of. From Randall Moore's ruthless murder to Scott Peterson's heartbreaking betrayal, these killers show no remorse for their actions. These chilling stories reveal how someone can turn against their own family. Let's begin.
You give a new meaning to the word evil. I've never, ever seen anybody like you.
In February 2015, the peaceful town was shaken by a tragedy that would leave a lasting scar. Sheila Lynch, a grieving mother, sat in a courtroom filled with tense silence, awaiting justice for her daughter's brutal murder. The room was packed, with about a dozen deputies present, underscoring the moment's gravity. In February 2008, Lynch met Randall Moore, and their connection quickly grew. By March 2009, they welcomed a beautiful baby into their lives. And later that summer, they tied the knot, beginning their journey as a family. At first, everything seemed perfect, but cracks began to show over time. Friends noticed that something wasn't right in their relationship. In October 2009, Lynch decided to move out of their shared home on Aurora Avenue in Des Moines. Just a few days later, on October 16th, she took a brave step and obtained a protective order from the court, ensuring Randall would stay away from her. Despite her efforts to protect herself, tragedy struck. On a day that should have been ordinary, Lynch was at a retail store in Des Moines when Randall appeared. He abducted her, hurt her deeply, and ended her life far too soon.
He grabbed her like a piece of luggage and he threw her face.
Argumentative.
Threw her face first in the back seat of the car.
Sheila sat in the courtroom, her heart heavy with grief. Her daughter, a vibrant soul who had brought light to so many lives, was taken in a senseless act of violence. Her daughter, Teresa Ann Lynch Moore, was kidnapped and killed by Randall Moore. As the accused stood before the judge, Sheila couldn't believe what she was hearing. His words were bold, arrogant, and utterly devoid of regret. As the investigation unfolded, one witness nervously spoke up, her voice trembling. She confessed that the entire situation had left her scared, unsure of what would happen next.
It was a horrifying thing to see, not knowing what was going to happen. I know I was very scared.
The trial reached its peak when the judge was visibly moved, delivering a statement that reflected both the legal system's perspective and the shared grief of those present. Sheila felt a sense of justice when the judge addressed the accused. His words were sharp and direct, cutting through the hollow excuses. "No other woman and child will be hurt by this man," Sheila stated. "He hung himself. I didn't have to do it for him."
And a half dozen deputies within arm's reach, Randall Moore stood as the verdicts against him were read.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
Finally, justice was served. Moore was sentenced to 3 life sentences. Hearing this, the victim's mother, Sheila, thought nothing could bring her daughter back. Sheila found solace in the courtroom's collective humanity. The sentence was a reminder that actions have consequences and that justice, though painful, could bring a sense of closure. Throughout the entire trial, Moore never once showed any sign of remorse for his actions. His demeanor remained cold and indifferent.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Teresa Ann's death. It could have all been prevented. All you had to do is let me see my kid. Now you're never going to see her again.
Sheila's story is a heart-wrenching reminder of a mother's loss and the resilience required to face unimaginable pain. It also highlights the strength of the legal system in delivering justice, offering a glimmer of hope amid profound tragedy. Her daughter's memory, preserved in the hearts of many, became a beacon of light in a dark time.
It took the jury in the Randall Moore murder trial just a little over 2 hours this morning to reach that verdict. Moore was convicted of killing his estranged wife, Teresa Ann Lynch Moore, last November.
Randall Moore's shocking lack of concern for his family's safety is hard to forget. The next case revealed senseless violence that destroyed lives.
We have two murders. We have issues of flight, home invasion, kidnapping. The defendant is facing life offenses. I think a high bond is warranted under the circumstances to assure the...
On November 19, 2014, the small town of Kalkaska, Michigan was shaken by a tragedy. Keith Ferguson, a man once trusted by his family, committed 2 horrific murders. His victims were his wife, Tiffany Ferguson, and his father-in-law, James Weber. It was a crime that stunned the entire community. Keith Ferguson's actions on that tragic day in November 2014 left the small town of Kalkaska, Michigan, heartbroken. Tiffany Ferguson, his wife, was a loving and caring woman who had been thinking about leaving Keith. She wanted a better life for herself and her children. Unfortunately, Keith couldn't handle the thought of losing her. On that day, Keith's anger boiled over. He shot Tiffany in their home, ending her life in a moment of rage. But the tragedy didn't stop there. James Weber, Tiffany's father, rushed to protect her. Sadly, Keith turned his gun on James too, taking his life as well. People who knew the family were shocked. Tiffany was a kind soul, and James was a protective and loving father. Investigators believe that Keith's actions were fueled by anger and his desire to control the situation.
We'll never again have an opportunity to hurt any innocent people. We'll never again have the opportunity.
What made it even more heartbreaking was the fact that Tiffany had been planning to move on, seeking safety and happiness. Instead, her life and her father's were taken in such a senseless way. The legal process was tough and emotional. Keith Ferguson had a reputation for being loud and disruptive in court. But on March 17, 2015, the day of his sentencing, he was quiet. Earlier that month, Keith had pleaded guilty as part of a deal, which led to 10 other charges being dropped. Despite his calm behavior, the pain and loss he caused couldn't be undone. Judge George Mertz delivered a powerful sentence. For the first-degree murder of his wife, Tiffany Ferguson, Keith was sentenced to life in prison without any chance of parole. This meant he would never have the opportunity to walk free again. Additionally, for the second-degree murder of his father-in-law, James Weber, Keith received an extra sentence of 31 to 60 years in prison. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as the sentence was read. But Keith showed no remorse. While the punishment brought some justice, it could never erase the heartbreak felt by family and friends. Keith's actions had changed many lives forever, but the judge's decision ensured he would never harm anyone else again.
And did you intend to kill him?
Oh, yeah.
And did you think about whether or not you wanted to kill him and make a deliberate choice to do so?
No way. Put half a magazine in that.
During sentencing, friends of the victims spoke about the pain Keith's actions caused. Carla Seating, a family friend, addressed the court saying, "I knew that one day you would kill her." She also shared that Keith would never have contact with his children again, a decision he agreed was best for them. Although no family members were present, Tiffany's friends found some comfort in the sentencing. Carla described feeling Tiffany's presence during the hearing, which brought her a sense of peace. The community rallied around the grieving family, organizing a memorial race in Tiffany and James's honor. Set for May 9th, the race aimed to raise funds to support their loved ones and ensure their memory lived on.
That he has caused all of us and the children, and that they're not going to have their mom.
Keith's brutality affected everyone in the community. The next story reveals the heartbreaking betrayal of a child's trust in California.
You are a failure as a father. You are a failure as a man. And you are a failure as a human being. Hope you relive the image of you murdering my baby.
On April 21, 2017, a father named Aramazd Andressian Sr. took his 5-year-old son, Aramazd Jr., also known as Peaky, to Disneyland. What seemed like a happy outing turned into a horrifying tragedy that shook Southern California. After a fun trip to Disneyland, 5-year-old Aramazd Jr., known as Peaky, was supposed to be returned to his mother, Ana Estevez. However, when Peaky's father, Aramazd Andressian Sr., didn't show up for the scheduled custody exchange, Ana grew worried. Andressian was later found unconscious near his car in a South Pasadena park, but there was no sign of Peaky. He claimed he couldn't remember what had happened, leaving everyone confused and searching for answers. For the next 2 months, Peaky's disappearance became a mystery that captivated the community. Search teams scoured Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County, hoping to find any clue that would lead to the young boy. Despite the efforts, there was no trace of him. Meanwhile, Andressian, acting as though nothing had happened, fled to Las Vegas. He shaved his beard, dyed his hair, and tried to blend in, avoiding any attention. As the investigation continued, the mystery deepened, with many people wondering where Peaky could be and why his father seemed so detached.
Aramazd Sr. acting like a father who was distraught and searching for his son.
He never asked about the condition of his son or whether or not his son had been located.
On June 30th, 2017, the devastating news was revealed. The remains of little Peaky were discovered near Lake Cachuma. Authorities shared the tragic details, explaining that his father, Andressian, had taken his life by smothering him with a piece of clothing. It was a heartbreaking moment for everyone involved. Andressian was apprehended in Las Vegas and brought back to California to stand trial. In court, Peaky's mother, Ana Estevez, spoke with a broken heart. Holding back tears, she shared how her son had been her greatest joy, but now he was the source of her deepest sorrow. She expressed the overwhelming pain of losing her child, a pain that would never go away. Anna told the judge that Andressian had failed as a father and as a human being. She pleaded for the maximum sentence, hoping for justice in honor of her precious son. Peaky's memory would live on in her heart, but no punishment could ever truly fill the void left by his loss.
Forethought, premeditation, and deliberation murdered Aramazd A. Jr., a human being.
Aramazd Andressian Sr. pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Still, he didn't show any remorse.
Police have maintained he killed his son to get back at his estranged wife during a custody battle.
The story of Peaky's life and tragic death is a painful reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a smile. The community mourned the loss of an innocent child, while Anna carried the weight of unimaginable grief. Justice has been served, but the hole left in her heart will never heal.
I look at his picture all the time. I have a picture in my room. I talk to him. I pray that I will see him in my dreams.
Andressian's devastating actions underscore the unimaginable pain, yet the next case reveals the chilling betrayal of a husband.
Two facts remain the same all these years later. Number one, Lacey and Connor are still dead. And number two, you killed him.
Scott Peterson's case captivated the nation in the early 2000s. In 2004, he was convicted of the murder of his wife, Lacey Peterson, and their unborn son, Connor. The crime occurred on Christmas Eve in 2002, when Lacey, 8 months pregnant, went missing from their Modesto, California home. Scott maintained his innocence throughout, but the prosecution painted a grim picture, claiming he murdered his wife and discarded her body in the Berkeley Marina. Scott Peterson's life took a tragic turn when his wife, Lacey, suddenly disappeared on Christmas Eve in 2002. Scott told police he had left early that morning to go fishing, but as the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered discrepancies in his story. Lacey, who was 8 months pregnant, seemed to vanish without a trace. The community reunited together, searching for the missing woman, while law enforcement worked tirelessly to gather clues. For months, the family held out hope that Lacey and her unborn son, Connor, would return home safely. The media coverage grew, with the entire country watching the search unfold.
And we know from Cowan that that's still misconduct.
There's actual proof that she went back there, she did what she was instructed by the judge to do, and she reached a verdict.
Then, in April 2003, a grim discovery changed everything. Lacey's body, along with that of her baby, was found in San Francisco Bay. The remains had been badly decomposed, but it was clear that the worst had happened. This devastating discovery triggered a major shift in the investigation, and soon after, Scott was arrested. The evidence against him grew stronger, leading to his conviction for the murders of his wife and unborn son. What had seemed like a hopeful search turned into a heartbreaking conclusion for Lacey's family. As the investigation progressed, surprising details came to light. Scott Peterson, a man who seemed to have it all, had been involved in a secret relationship with Amber Frey, a massage therapist. Amber later revealed that Scott had told her his wife, Lacey, was already dead. The evidence against him continued to grow, and as the trial went on, Scott's actions raised even more questions. People who knew Lacey well testified that Scott seemed strangely unaffected by his wife's disappearance. Some even noticed he showed more emotion when a barbecue chicken burned than when he spoke about Lacey. Despite these odd behaviors, Scott insisted that his wife had been killed by an intruder. However, the jury was not convinced. After hearing all the evidence and testimonies, they decided Scott was guilty of Lacey's murder. The case shocked many, as it revealed how someone could hide such a dark secret, even from those closest to them. It was a heartbreaking story that left everyone wondering how someone so familiar could be capable of such a crime.
For their forensic investigation, including DNA testing of physical items that may lead to exculpatory evidence and/or leads to possible suspects.
In 2004, Scott Peterson was sentenced to death. However, in 2020, his death sentence was overturned and he was resentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. The California Supreme Court found errors in his trial, especially during jury selection. Despite this, his conviction was upheld. In 2022, his appeal for a new trial was denied. In all the trials, Peterson didn't show any remorse or guilt for his act. His case remains a significant part of American true crime history, and his legal battle continues with the Los Angeles Innocence Project, seeking new evidence in his favor.
State of California versus Scott Peterson. We, the jury in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder of Lacey Denise Peterson.
The case of Scott Peterson stirs mixed emotions. For Lacey's family, especially her mother, Sarah Rocha, the pain of losing Lacey and her unborn son was unimaginable. They believed in Scott's guilt and struggled with his apparent lack of remorse. For others, Scott's claims of innocence spark a debate that continues to divide people to this day. Some believe he was wrongfully convicted, while others still feel the weight of the tragedy and the lives lost.
We've been through so much these last days that I'd like to make a plea to the person or persons who have my daughter. Please bring our daughter home.
Next, we explore the chilling case of Khloe Driver, whose violent outbursts shattered lives and left a trail of devastation.
I see her everywhere, in everything. She lives on and shows me that beauty can be found anywhere.
On December 8, 2020, in the quiet neighborhood of Canton, Georgia, police responded to a harrowing scene. A 13-month-old baby girl, Hannah Nicole Driver, had been brutally killed. Her mother, 24-year-old Khloe Driver, was arrested at the scene after attempting to take her own life. Khloe, accompanied by a group believed to be part of a traveling cult, stopped at a home in the Mountain View neighborhood. Shortly after arriving, Khloe took a knife, locked herself in a bedroom with Hannah, and stabbed her daughter 4 times. The baby's father desperately tried to save her, but tragically, Hannah was pronounced dead on the scene. Khloe survived her self-inflicted wounds. When the case was trialed, her defense rested on an insanity plea. She claimed that her mental illness had driven her to commit an unthinkable act, a tragic moment she said she could barely comprehend herself. Her defense painted her as a deeply troubled young woman, overwhelmed by struggles beyond her control. But the prosecution told a much different story, one that sent chills through the courtroom. They described a mother whose behavior after the crime showed no sign of remorse. Instead, they portrayed her as cold and indifferent to the unspeakable loss of her child.
I wanted to see if she was okay, because, I mean, she was running from them. And then they had got a hold of her and was dragging her back to the apartments that were right there.
The trial was deeply emotional. Police officers who had first arrived at the scene gave tearful testimonies, recounting the devastating moment they found 13-month-old Hannah. Jurors struggled to contain their emotions as they viewed crime scene photos and body camera footage, each image revealing the heartbreaking details of the baby's final moments. In the end, the courtroom was filled with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. The innocence of a baby lost and the unimaginable actions of a mother left everyone grappling with the weight of the tragedy, their hearts heavy with grief and disbelief. The 6-day trial of Khloe Driver was a heartbreaking journey through the tragic loss of 13-month-old Hannah. Over 21 witnesses came forward, and 135 pieces of evidence were presented.
I am being forced to get into a truck with Benjamin and Markel or Brian Joyce to see my daughter again because he has kept her away from me.
He is the next of kin in this case, so our office makes contact with the next of kin to the victims, and we had done that on occasion. Okay.
Along with it, including chilling 911 calls and crime scene photos. Each day in court revealed more details of that fateful day, leaving everyone grappling with the unimaginable. Khloe's defense focused on her mental health. 3 psychologists testified about her profound struggles, and Khloe herself spoke, expressing deep regret for what had happened. Her lawyers argued that her mental illness clouded her judgment and drove her to a tragic act that she could never undo.
Guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 5, cruelty to children in the first degree. Guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill.
But the prosecution painted a starkly different picture. They described Khloe as a mother who showed little care for her child, even during the trial. They pointed to moments where her behavior seemed cold and inappropriate, arguing that her actions showed a troubling lack of accountability. They highlighted how her choices led to Hannah's heartbreaking end, leaving no room for excuses. The courtroom was filled with grief and conflicting emotions. The evidence told a painful story, but the memories of baby Hannah brought a shared hope of justice and healing to the wake of such an unspeakable tragedy.
You were attempting to save her life, and that he was attempting to save Hannah's life.
Yeah, he was.
Did you care about Kuwani and Hannah?
Of course.
Do you still care about them?
Yeah.
The jury rejected Khloe's insanity plea, finding her guilty but mentally ill. She was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, child cruelty, and aggravated assault. Judge Markel sentenced her to life in prison with the chance of parole plus 20 years, while acknowledging the trauma inflicted on everyone involved. During the time of trial, Khloe gets emotional as she feels guilty for what she did to her daughter.
This state would dictate that you would serve 30 years of a life sentence before you were considered for parole.
This case struck at the deepest levels of human emotion. A mother tackling her child's life is an act that defies comprehension. The community mourned the loss of an innocent baby while struggling to understand the profound darkness that led to this tragedy. During the hearing, the father of the baby said, "This woman took my daughter's life."
Where I sat for 3 months in a van just screaming and screaming and screaming that this woman believed that she was entitled to take my daughter's life out of this world.
Khloe Driver's heart-wrenching crime devastated a family. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. But the next case takes a dark turn with a shocking betrayal that led to the death of a husband.
And it has been so hard to go through all of this for the last 3.5+ years after what I went through.
On a quiet day in 2012, tragedy struck a family in Carlsbad, California, when Julie Harper was sentenced to 40 years in prison for killing her husband. Julie Harper, 39 at the time, shot and killed her husband, Jason Harper, in their upstairs bedroom. Meanwhile, their 3 children were downstairs, unaware of the horrific event unfolding above them. Julie claimed that the shooting was an accident, a desperate act of self-defense during a heated argument. She testified that Jason, an athletic and spirited man, charged at her, and the gun went off unintentionally. However, the story is not like that. Investigators uncovered troubling details, including Julie's preparation of a getaway bag filled with passports and cash, suggesting she planned to flee.
Harper told them to look in a blue backpack now at his house for attorney's fees. Inside, nearly $40,000 in cash.
Julie Harper's case took a dramatic turn as it unfolded in court. At first, during her initial trial, she was acquitted of first-degree murder, leaving her family and the public divided over what had truly happened on that fateful day. According to Julie, her husband mistreated her for years, and on that day he was doing the same. But in a retrial in 2015, a jury reviewed the evidence again and found her guilty of second-degree murder for the death of her husband, Jason Harper.
Julie Harper talked about the day she killed her husband. She said she and her husband Jason started fighting about money in their bedroom when he got violent.
The judge handed down a 15-year to life sentence, but an additional 25 years were added because Julie had used a firearm during the crime. This brought her total sentence to 40 years to life, ensuring she would spend decades behind bars. Years later, Julie sought to shorten her sentence, citing a new California Supreme Court ruling that allowed judges more flexibility in reducing firearm-related penalties. She hoped this could give her a chance for an earlier release. However, the prosecution firmly opposed her request, arguing that Julie's actions, including disposing of the murder weapon and preparing a getaway bag, made her a danger to public safety. They believed her sentence should remain intact to reflect the seriousness of her crime. On a quiet Thursday morning, the courtroom fell silent as Superior Court Judge Blaine Bowman made his final decision. Julie Harper, who had been convicted of killing her husband Jason, sat anxiously as the judge upheld her original 40-year to life sentence, rejecting her appeal. The prosecution painted a clear picture of Julie's actions, emphasizing the troubling details surrounding the case. They pointed out that Julie had never shown genuine remorse for taking Jason's life. Adding to the suspicion, the murder weapon was never found, and evidence suggested Julie had intentionally gotten rid of it.
Grabbed me by the arms, began shaking me forcefully.
Julie says she feared for her life.
Prosecutors also highlighted that Julie had prepared a getaway bag with passports and cash, which they argued showed she had plans to flee after the tragic event. These actions, they claimed, reflected a calculated attempt to escape responsibility for her crime. Judge Bowman agreed, stating that reducing Julie's sentence would not serve justice. His decision was met with quiet relief by Jason's grieving family. Though the courtroom proceedings concluded, the emotional weight of the tragedy lingered. Jason's loved ones left the courthouse with heavy hearts, finding some solace in knowing that the sentence upheld the memory of a life taken too soon. Julie Harper was sentenced to 40 years to life for killing her husband. Jason's family, including his mother Lena, expressed relief at the decision, insisting that justice for Jason must be served. They believed Julie should serve at least as many years as she took from her husband's life.
For a total term of 40 years to life in state prison. Do we have, and from probation, quit your appearance for probation, I failed to get that.
There wasn't a hint of remorse, only a quiet determination. She explained each of her actions with clarity, revealing that every choice she made was driven by the instinct to protect herself. It wasn't recklessness or malice, it was survival.
Allows the judge discretion over the gun allegation, which added 25 years to life to her sentence. It was mandatory in California until just this year. Now her turn to appeal it.
This heartbreaking case left a family shattered. For Jason's loved ones, the memories of his vibrant personality were overshadowed by the devastating loss. While justice brought some closure, the emotional scars remain. Even Julie's children show remorse for their dad, saying to their mother that, "I don't want to call her mom." Justice was served, but the scars of this tragedy will remain forever.
Julie would usually be asleep. You called your mom Julie, is that right?
Yes.
Is that what you call her now?
Yes.
How come you started calling her Julie?
Because I don't want to say that she is my mom.
Charlie Adelson's case continues to evoke strong emotions. The next case is the shocking murder plot, which leaves everyone speechless.
Two sentencing in the state of Florida versus Catherine Magbanua, 2016 CF 3036 and 2018 CF 497.
In 2014, Florida State University law professor Dan Markel was tragically shot and killed at his home in Tallahassee. His murder unraveled a shocking conspiracy involving his former brother-in-law, Charlie Adelson. Once a respected periodontist, Charlie was later convicted in a murder-for-hire plot that would devastate multiple families. Dan Markel's murder wasn't a random act of violence. It was the result of a deep family conflict. At the time of his death, Dan was going through a difficult custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. Their 2 young children were at the center of this emotional dispute. Wendy's brother, Charlie Adelson, who was a successful periodontist, became entangled in this struggle as the conflict between his sister and Dan escalated. In a series of unfortunate events, Charlie allegedly took matters into his own hands. It's believed that he wanted to end the ongoing family feud and ensure a resolution to the custody battle, even if it meant taking the most drastic step. Through a carefully planned murder-for-hire scheme, Charlie arranged for 2 hitmen to carry out the crime. Dan's murder, which occurred in 2014, shocked the community and devastated Dan's family and friends. The investigation unraveled a dark web of conspiracy, eventually pointing to Charlie Adelson as the mastermind. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. What started as a personal dispute between a husband and wife tragically led to a loss of life and shattered a family in the process.
I do.
You may stand.
Stand. I would just like to say that I maintain my innocence.
After years of investigation, the truth behind Dan Markel's tragic death began to emerge. In 2023, Charlie Adelson's trial finally took place. It was an intense 8-day process that uncovered shocking details of the crime. The prosecution presented crucial evidence, including secretly recorded conversations where Charlie was heard discussing the murder plot. These recordings linked him to the 2 hitmen who carried out the crime, as well as their intermediary, who helped facilitate the murder for hire. As the trial progressed, the pieces of the puzzle came together, revealing Charlie's role in orchestrating the entire plot. The jury, after carefully considering the evidence, found him guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. Leon Circuit Judge Stephen Everett, after hearing the verdict, sentenced Charlie to life in prison for the murder of Dan Markel. In addition to the life sentence, Charlie received 30-year sentences for the conspiracy and solicitation charges, all of which would be served consecutively. Though the legal process didn't bring back Dan, it provided a sense of justice for his family, knowing that Charlie would face the consequences for his role in such a devastating loss. Charlie Adelson is now serving his life sentence in a South Dakota prison. However, his lawyer recently filed a motion for resentencing on 2 counts. During the sentence, he didn't show remorse. Citing errors in the sentencing scoresheet, the request, if granted, could reduce his sentence, though it wouldn't affect his life term for the murder.
Read, if there can please be no expressions, either of shock or anger, please.
In a dramatic turn of events following the tragic murder of law professor Dan Markel, Catherine Magbanua faced justice after years of legal battles. Initially tried in 2019 alongside Siegfried Garcia, her case ended in a mistrial when the jury couldn't reach a verdict. However, her retrial in May 2022 brought closure. On May 27, 2022, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. Magbanua received a life sentence without parole, along with 2 additional 30-year sentences.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2. A. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
The murder left an indelible mark on the lives of Markel's family and friends. For the public, the case serves as a chilling reminder of how greed and resentment can lead to devastating consequences. Adelson's case shows a terrifying story that leaves everyone in shock and disbelief. But the next case uncovers a mother's horrifying act of violence.
We still love Michelle as a wife, mother, and friend, and hope that she receives the treatment that she needs.
In October 2008, Michelle Kehoe, a mother from Coralville, Iowa, drove her 2 sons to a secluded spot near Littleton. What followed was a horrific act that would leave one of her sons dead and the other severely injured. Michelle taped their eyes shut and then slashed their throats with a knife before attempting to take her own life. In October 2008, Michelle Kehoe took her 2 sons to a quiet, secluded area near Littleton, Iowa. It was a trip that would change their lives forever. In a shocking and heartbreaking moment, Michelle, in a fit of anger and confusion, taped their eyes shut and then attacked them with a knife. Tragically, her 2-year-old son, who was too young to understand the horror around him, lost his life to the brutal wounds. Her 7-year-old son, however, showed incredible strength and resilience. Despite the terrifying attack, he survived and, as difficult as it must have been, he courageously testified in court about what happened that day. Initially, Michelle tried to shift the blame, telling authorities that a stranger had attacked them. However, the truth soon came out. After some time, she admitted that she was the one responsible for the tragedy. The boy's bravery and the heartbreaking loss of his little brother left the community in shock. It was a devastating moment for everyone who knew the family, especially as a mother was the one who caused the harm. Despite her confession, the legal system had to carry out its duty to ensure justice for the surviving child.
Guilty of murder in the first degree, dated November 5, 2009, by Anthony L. Buter, presiding juror.
As Michelle Kehoe's trial began, the case became more complicated than anyone expected. Despite her confession, Michelle's defense team argued that she wasn't mentally fit to stand trial. They believed that her troubled mental health played a significant role in the attack, and that this should have been a central part of her defense. Her lawyers claimed that Michelle wasn't in the right state of mind when she made the confession to the police, and that her statements should not have been used against her.
Strategy to get, quote, your story out through the experts, because then you wouldn't be subjected to cross-examination.
The defense also argued that her attorney during the trial had failed to properly protect her rights, especially when it came to the statements she made while in the hospital. According to them, these statements were influenced by her mental health struggles and should not have been admitted as evidence. The defense hoped that the court would consider her mental health history and show mercy, acknowledging her struggles. Despite these claims, the court ruled otherwise. The judges determined that Michelle understood what she had done, the charges against her, and the process of her trial. They found that her confession was given voluntarily, without coercion, and that she was fit to stand trial. The Iowa Court of Appeals rejected her appeal, confirming that Michelle Kehoe was fit to stand trial. The judges concluded that she understood the charges against her and had voluntarily confessed to the crime. In the end, Michelle was convicted of murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole and is currently serving her sentence at the Mitchellville Women's Prison.
Society has overall suffered because of your actions and because of the decisions that you made.
As the trial went on, Michelle became overwhelmed with emotion. The weight of what she had done hit her hard, and as the evidence was presented, she started to lose her composure. Her voice shook, and tears filled her eyes. It was clear she now fully understood the seriousness of her actions and felt deep regret.
And I want to express my deep sorrow. I hope that was for healing, for showing, for my friends and family.
This tragic case left a community in shock. The horror of a mother turning against her children is almost impossible to comprehend. While the surviving son's courage in testifying helped secure justice, the grief of losing a young life and the trauma of surviving such an attack will stay with him forever. The case also highlights the importance of mental health and understanding the complexities of crime and justice. Michelle Kehoe's shocking crime was a heart-wrenching betrayal. Next is the chilling crime that left an entire community in shock.
Almost every weekend, and when those weekends come back up, I don't get to see her anymore.
In March 2023, a horrific tragedy unfolded in Clark County, Washington, when Kirkland Warren brutally murdered his former girlfriend, Michelle Melendez, and her 7-year-old daughter, Layla Stewart. Their bodies were found on March 22, 2023, in a rural area near Washougal, with both victims suffering gunshot wounds to the head. This crime was not only devastating for their family and friends, but it also left the community in shock. Just days before the tragic deaths of Michelle Melendez and her daughter Layla, Warren's violence had already escalated. Earlier, he had fired shots at Michelle's apartment, prompting her to take the crucial step of obtaining a protection order against him. Despite this legal safeguard, Warren's aggression continued, leading to even more devastating consequences. The warning signs were all there, yet he chose to ignore them, escalating his actions further. His crime against Michelle and Layla was part of a deeply troubling pattern of behavior. Beyond the horrific murders, there were disturbing allegations of child harm, adding to the fear and pain felt by all who knew them. His actions left a permanent scar on the families who loved Michelle and Layla, a loss that could never be repaired by any form of justice. The families were left grappling with the weight of their grief, knowing that no sentence or punishment could undo the harm Warren caused. For the victims' loved ones, the story wasn't just one of murder. It was about a series of signs that were ignored, a pattern of violence that ultimately shattered lives and left a community struggling to understand how such cruelty could unfold. After a lengthy and emotional series of court hearings, Kirkland Warren finally admitted his guilt in a shocking and heartbreaking turn of events. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder for the tragic deaths of his former girlfriend, Michelle Melendez, and her 7-year-old daughter, Layla Stewart. He also pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In addition, Warren entered an Alford plea for charges of child harm, which meant he acknowledged there was enough evidence to convict him, though he continued to maintain his innocence.
Is that correct, Mr. Warren? You'd like to enter a not guilty plea today? Not guilty pleas received.
This plea came just days before his trial was scheduled to begin, sparing the grieving families from having to endure the painful and difficult details of the case in the courtroom. The families, though thankful to avoid further trauma, were still overwhelmed with the unfillable void left by the loss of their loved ones. Despite the legal process moving forward, no amount of justice could erase the unimaginable pain they felt. The empty spaces in their hearts and homes were a constant reminder that no verdict could ever bring Michelle and Layla back. The real punishment for the families was the enduring grief of losing 2 beloved lives so cruelly. On October 8, 2024, Kirkland Warren was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He will never again be able to harm anyone. However, the scars left on the families of Michelle and Layla will remain forever. Still, he shows no remorse for his actions. The community, although relieved by the conviction, knows that no sentence will ever truly make up for the loss of 2 innocent lives.
Given the nature of this particular charge, it could result in potentially a life imprisonment under the provisions of ISRB. And you've talked about that with your attorneys, sir.
The pain was obvious in the courtroom as family members spoke out. Layla's aunt and grandmother expressed how their lives were shattered by the loss of Layla and Michelle. "The day I lost them, I lost a part of myself," said Nicole Norris, Michelle's mother. The emotional weight of the case was felt by everyone present, and even the prosecutors, who had worked tirelessly for justice, struggled to hold back their emotions. For the families of the victims, the sentence was not a relief. It was a reminder of a pain that would never go away.
The orders are false security blankets. He was released with no GPS in the first place. We're angry.
The stories of these family killers serve as unsettling reminders of the darkness that can hide in those we trust most. Their soul-crushing actions shattered families, while their cold indifference in court added to the horror. The next video on your screen reveals more chilling cases that shocked their communities. Keep watching.